Hello and welcome back to Restore 2023. We're in Haggai today, which, apart from Obadiah, is the shortest book in the Old Testament. Now, Haggai's recorded ministry lasts only 4 months, but he, along with Zechariah, plays a really vital role in calling the returned exiles to resume work in the temple in Jerusalem. They'd actually laid the foundations of this temple 16 years before, soon after returning from Babylon, but had paused in the face of fierce opposition from Samaritans and some other neighbouring peoples who were worried about a revived Jewish nation in their midst. But since then, since pausing the work, the people had been finding life in the Promised Land disappointingly unfruitful. Harvests had been poor, the weather unfavourable, and everything they turned their hands to seemed to fail. So the Lord sends Haggai to their political and religious leaders, the governor and the high priest, to explain why. And the reason is that they have been building their own houses and feathering their own nests, whilst the house of the Lord lies in ruins, utterly neglected. In other words, the people's priorities are all wrong. They may have returned physically to the land, but they have not returned to their God. They had allowed their enemies to intimidate them and failed to trust in God's protection. And so the Lord has struck them with the curses promised in Deuteronomy for covenant unfaithfulness. Enter Haggai, and the governor, the high priest, and all the people repent of their selfishness at his message, because they recognise that the Lord has sent him. And this is the only essential qualification that a prophet needs, to be sent by the Lord, to be the Lord's messenger. Without it, all the eloquence, all the persuasive abilities, all the insight in the world don't matter at all. The true prophet speaks the words that God has given them. And we see the Lord at work not only in the message itself, but also in the way that people responded to it. After they chose to be obedient, he stirs up their spirits so that they have the desire and the capacity to do what needs to be done. A month or so passes, and people start to get discouraged because what they had achieved seemed a pale imitation of the temple's former glory. Some of the oldest among them, possibly including Haggai himself, may have seen the destruction of Solomon's temple 66 years before, and couldn't help comparing the magnificence of that structure with the more modest building that they're working on. They couldn't help but remember the riches that had filled the previous temple and that had been carried off by the Babylonians. But God reassures them. The same God who led the people out of Egypt and into this land remains with them now. Though their ancestors broke the covenant, leading to the exile, God has kept and will keep his side of the covenant. The new temple may look modest now, but God promises them that its glory will far exceed that of the old. And partly these verses refer to physical wealth. After all the gold and silver and gems in the earth belong to God by right as creator, and so he will so order the nations that such things will once again fill his temple. But these verses could go beyond physical wealth. They could be messianic, meaning that they point ahead to a time when God himself in Jesus will visit the temple and grant peace between the Lord and his people. And it is in that sense that the glory of this new temple will truly outweigh that of the old. Verses 10 to 14 of chapter 2 are somewhat strange. The point that Haggai is trying to make is that uncleanness is spread much more easily than holiness. Some of the people had clearly assumed that because they were back in the Holy Land, they themselves had become holy again, that somehow that holiness had been transmitted as if by osmosis. But Haggai tells them that actually the opposite is true. They have become defiled by their neglect of the Lord and their former sins. To be truly made holy again, they will need to refocus their national life around the Holy One of Israel himself, which will mean a complete shake-up of their priorities. By restarting the work on the temple, so long delayed, they have made a physical sign of their commitment to do just that, and so in return, God will end the curses they have lived under for 16 years and begin blessing them instead. And Haggai wants the people to remember in the future that these blessings began the day they returned to the Lord, in the hope that a future generation won't make the same mistakes.